everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're like me, you were a kid growing up in the 80s, and the best part of growing up as a kid in the 80s was getting to go to the arcade. Nothing like playing all the old classic arcade games that everybody seems to know today. And with that, you had ports to the home consoles at the time, and there was varying degrees of how good those were. But today we're going to talk about the NES and some of the ports that came to the NES that I think that are really good. So let's take a look at 3 of them today that I think that are some of the best. Well, before Super Mario Brothers were super, they were just Mario Brothers. And that's where this game comes in. This is pretty much a traditional arcade game at its finest right here. You have one screen and that's it. So what you see is what you get. And the only difference between this level and the next is how hard the levels are. So progressively gets more harder as you go along, and some of the bad guys are different, basically. Not a bad game. I love this game, except for if you have not played this game in a while, I always get messed up with the jumping. Because on here, you have to jump in the direction you want to go. Unlike Super Mario Brothers, where you can change the direction mid-jump, here, it's wherever you jump towards is where you're going, babe. So, basically, this is as Mario as it gets. You are a plumber in the sewers, and you are there just to clear them out of all the bad guys. You have turtles, insects, crabs, and you clear them out by bumping the ground underneath them for the most part, and then you have to kick them before they can get back up. And on certain levels, there's actual ice on the floor, so it makes it even more difficult because now you're sliding around. But this game is so much fun. It is a traditional, the more you play it, the better you get. And for an classic arcade game, I don't think you can get much better than this. The arcade version of Mario Brothers was released in '83, and the NES was about 3 years later in 1986. And it was released on several different consoles, arcade, NES, Atari 2600, 5200, and 7800. And this is one of the early games released on the NES. It's one of the black box games. Well, if there's an arcade game that I'm definitely a sucker for, it's definitely Popeye. I had this game originally on the Intellivision and definitely played this in the arcade whenever I came across it. It's one of my favorite arcade games of all time. Probably, I would even say, #1. And basically, you play as Popeye, and for those of you that are too young to remember, Popeye was a cartoon and probably even before my time. But you play a sailor named Popeye, and his girlfriend is Olive Oyl, and his nemesis is Bluto. And pretty much you have 3 different screens to go through, and what you're trying to do is get, in the first one, the hearts that, or kisses that Olive Oyl lets go. And the second one are notes, and the third one, I believe, is to spell out help. And once you get all of them, the level is over with. And meanwhile, you have to stay away from Bluto and other things that start coming at you as the game progresses. And the one thing that you do have is your spinach. So if you eat the spinach, you can take out Bluto, but until then, if you touch him, you die. And this game is so simple, but it's so much fun. I was such a big fan of Popeye growing up as a kid, and when this game came out, just loved it. And like I said, I owned this on the Intellivision first, and then when I found out it was on the NES, definitely had to pick it up. It does very well on the NES. It actually was pretty good on the Intellivision too, but you know, I mean, those controllers are just horrible. Just jumping and doing the punches on the side buttons are murder on your thumbs. Popeye was released in 1982 for the arcade version. I don't know when it was released for the Nintendo, but it was released for the arcade, NES, Atari, the 2600, and the 5200, the Intellivision, which I already mentioned, and actually the Odyssey 2. Now, I've played the Odyssey 2 one, and man, it is bad. So, little word for the wise, stay away from it. But as far as the NES port goes, pretty good. I love playing Qbert, but for some reason, no matter how much I play it, I seem to always be just as bad as I was the first time I played it. I don't know what it is. Just for getting the screen capture alone on this, I had to practice it for an hour to not look like a total noob at this thing. The controls are a bit different, at least in my opinion, so it will take you a little bit to get used to them. Originally, I played this on the Intellivision, and that was hard because there's no D-pad on those controllers. It's just a disc, and that's really hard. But this is a great port of Qbert. Now, I have this game. I have the ROM for the actual arcade game, and that is fantastic too. Obviously, it's the original. And it also kind of shows me that the sound isn't quite the same as the arcade on the NES here. But it's still a fantastic port of the game. You can't beat it. And what Qbert is, I have no idea. But what he does is you have to bounce on all the tiles, change the color, and once all the colors have changed, you go to the next level. And the bad guys are red bouncing balls, purple. All the monsters come that are purple. There's a snake, and what the rest of them are, I have no idea. But every arcade in the 80s definitely had a Qbert, and if you ever get a chance to play this game, definitely pick it up. But Qbert came out in the arcades about 1982 and then was ported to the NES in 1989. Along with the arcade version, of course, the NES, which we're talking about, the Intellivision, and of course Atari had it on the 2600 and 5200. These were definitely some of my favorite games to play when I was growing up. And while all of them had home releases on other systems, I feel that some of the best ports came on the NES. So, what are some of your favorite ports, and what systems did you play them on? That should just about do it for this time. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and take care.